This time I would like to have come forward Ms. Claudia Shea, and we'll leave Blair Littlejohn at the table to talk about Policy 2.54, one-stop film permitting. Our next workshop involves revisions to existing Policy 2.54, one-stop film permitting. There is just a couple of changes designed to make the policy more school-friendly, inclusive, and to promote the great work taking place on our campuses. This policy falls under the ownership of the Department of Communications and represents a long-time interlocal agreement in partnership with Palm Beach County Film and Television Commission. Christy Andrani, who is the Director of Operations and Production for the Commission, is in the audience today and available to answer questions the board may have about our partnership. And now I'll turn the microphone over to our Director of Communications, Ms. Claudia Shea, to explain the policy revision. She's also a world-renowned makeup artist for Donald Fenoy. So I just want y'all to know that.
I think you need a little more mascara tonight. Okay, and you mentioned Christy from the Film Commission, and I'm going to really put her on the spot and have her stand up. Our partnership, this interlocal agreement with the Film Commission, with the county in general, is extraordinary. We've been partners with the county now for about 30 years on this, and I can't tell you what an asset this is to the district. Okay, so getting started, I'm just going to give you a broad overview of what this is. And as Dr. Fenoy said, we really aren't making that many changes. So the purpose of this policy is, what do we do when a commercial organization wants to come in and film on our campuses? If it's TV, that's different. That's covered in the public information policy, but this is just commercial organizations, whether or not money exchanges hands. Okay? A lot of people come in, want to do documentaries or commercials or whatever. So that's what this is all about. So the policy sets forth guidelines and protocol regarding commercial filming or video, digital or audio recording on district property. And then we really wanted to add clarity to what you see below, because as Mr. Littlejohn can attest, this policy, the way it was written before, was this long. And when Blair first said, I think I need you to rewrite that policy, I thought, oh, this will take me 5 minutes. But no, we ended up making it really long because we added so much in there to really protect our schools, but to also open up opportunity and promote our schools. Okay, so what we wanted to add clarity to was district discretion, when we can say no, the application process, permitting guidelines, the use of school names, logos, or identifying signage, which is key, and I'll talk about that more in a moment, and the suspension of production or recording. So the first revision, and again, there are two major ones, is the name change. So one-stop permitting is a process, but I think to the general public, if they were to see, this is our one-stop film permitting process, it's kind of confusing. You know, it's really inside baseball. So let's just call it what it is. So we're proposing that we change the name to filming or recording on school district property. We also are adding language stating that the district has absolutely no obligation to permit commercial filming. The superintendent or superintendent designee really authorizes what we move forward with and what we don't. We're also adding detailed guidance regarding the application process, and Christy and her team are just wonderful at really making it simple and guiding a producer through that process. And as you know now, the interlocal agreement with the county provides that all commercial requests are routed through the Film Commission, through this process known as one-stop permitting, thus the name of this policy in the first place. So typically what happens is a production company will call Christy and say, hey, you know, we want to do this on one of our campuses. Christy will call me, then I'll mention it to Blair and to the principal and the regional and the deputy superintendent, and everyone discusses whether or not they think this is a good idea. If it's a good idea, then it moves forward with leases, permitting, insurance, and all that good stuff. And if it's not, it just ends right there. Or another way that we hear of these is a principal be contacted. Then the principal will call me, and then same thing. We'll just go through Christy, and she'll handle it from there. Other revisions. Language regarding the commission's permitting process, which must contain all prohibitions contained in the policy. So that would be violence, alcohol, drug use, anything like that is an act. We stop. We just don't do that. Okay, this is the big change. Allows the use of school names, logos, or identifying signage in films or TV programs that are non-fictional in nature. Okay, so the two things here. Before, our policy excluded using names ever, which wasn't really good. It really should be decided on a case-by-case basis, For example, Olympic Heights, about a year and a half ago, Shark Tank came down because a girl there was very innovative and she won a contest. So they decided to film the show there, and it would have been great if we could have said, this girl did all of this and she's one of our own, and Shark Tank went to her school, but we couldn't use the name of the school because the policy prohibited it. The other thing that you need to pay attention to in this sentence is programs, the use of names in programs that are non-fictional in nature. So if somebody wants to film some sort of a sci-fi, for example, a documentary on one of our campuses, well, we don't want them to use the name Jupiter High School, for example, because this isn't real. And so we would prohibit something like that as well. Additionally, it requires that the permittee enters into a facility lease agreement, excuse me, if the program involves the use of district property. This is just outside of normal hours. You wouldn't have to do that if it's just, as described in the contract itself. Addition of language informing the permittee that recordings must not disrupt instruction or other activities. And we'll get requests, and Mr. Littlejohn knows this all too well, that they'll want to come in the middle of the daytime and go into a classroom when the teacher is trying to teach. We never had language in there before saying you can't do that. So we just really need to work out all of these details on the front end. Addition of language prohibiting the permittee from using the recording to express or imply any endorsement of a commercial product or service. This is important because we have vendors who are doing a great job in our schools, but we're buying their product. And we don't want them, and they do ask this comes up regularly, they want to know if they could come to our school and show our kids using this product. And they do that because then they want to use us as a testimonial, almost like a commercial, where we don't get anything out of it, and we're the 10th largest district, and it looks really good that we're using their product. So we don't want that. And then finally, it defines terms which could result in the suspension of the production or recording until the violation has been resolved to the satisfaction of the school principal or administrator site. So they enter into this contract, they agree to everything that we want them to do, and then somewhere along the way, something goes astray. Maybe we told them they couldn't use the name, and they're using the name. So this just gives us that power right there that we tell them, sorry, you have to stop until you rectify whatever the problem is. And pretty much that's it. It's a quick overview. We just want to make this process more inclusive. We want to be able to promote our schools that are doing great things by using their names. And we just want more guidance in there so legally we're protected. And I can't thank Mr. Littlejohn enough for his guidance in this process. I mean, he's just, between Christy and Mr. Littlejohn, they just make this process so very simple. So anyway, that's my presentation for today, and if you have any questions, I'd love to take them.
Dr. Robinson?
Thank you. So, two things. So first, a request. Let's see. It actually bugs me some that we give decision-making authority to another entity.
They don't make the decisions. We do.
Okay, but
They get the
they're an
request.
evaluator?
No, they get the request, and what their responsibility is from that point is to pass it on to us. So then at that point, we talk to the principal, we talk to, everyone I mentioned. Do you think this is a good idea? Is this something that you want to do? What they do is they make sure that all the permitting is in order, and they'll speak to Blair about all of that. They'll work with our risk management people to make sure insurances, so they don't tell anybody to go away. They present us with every single offer.
Okay, and so I think what I would request is that the board gets like an annual report
Okay,
on requests that were made and if they were denied, why, right? I'm just thinking about equity, right? So, okay, the other thing is, and I think this may be addressed now, but there was a relatively recent situation, whatever anniversary of the NFL was, I don't know these things, right? There was I would call her a new filmmaker, maybe? I don't know what the right words are. Who wanted to do a documentary at one of our high schools highlighting the football team in recognition of whatever this anniversary was for the NFL. And as I understood, the school would get money, the filmmaker, I guess, would get money, however it went. And that got squashed because we couldn't use the name of the school or show the students, right? And so as I read this, there's now a process by which that could happen.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah, and we still, as far as children being on camera and names and all of that, there is a policy in place too where we get permission for all of that, and then that happens. But yeah, it was not fair that you weren't able to use the names if it was positive for the district. It didn't make any sense.
okay. And then my last question is on the one where a vendor would essentially create a commercial. And then, so if we were gonna get something out of it, like say that they would split the proceeds with the district, would we view that to be okay?
So that would be a donation because we're not in a position to be able to make a profit, but Mr. Littlejohn can explain more of that.
There's also a separate policy on the books about generally not endorsing products and services. So you'd have to square it with that as well.
Okay, so then, and the reason I asked the question is the way I heard it was, like, that would be prohibited because we don't want to be in a position of like endorsing and we wouldn't get anything out of it. So I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't because we weren't getting money. It's because we do not think we should be endorsing.
It's exploitation
All right.
in many regards.
No, I just want to be clear about the thinking here,
Right.
because, you know. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mrs. Andrews?
Thank you. I just put a call in just yesterday about someone who is interested. When will this actually be final? Are you going to be bringing it back to us again? This is just the first.
This is it, but it should be in place by June, so that was the hope that we would be all set for the new school year. I will say that this school year that passed, we wouldn't have approved many anyway, just because of the visitor policy that we had in place. We didn't want outside companies on our property. And so this year has been pretty non-eventful as far as this, but we want everything in place for the new school year.
Okay.
Ms. Andrews, Ms. Bass just let me know that this will come to you for adoption on 7/21.
Any other questions? Thank you both.
Thank you, everyone.
Superintendent, are we through with the workshops?
No, sir, we have a few more.
A few more?
Yes, sir. At this time, I would like to invite to the podium our Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Glenda Sheffield, Dr. June Neese, our Assistant Superintendent of Student Wellness, Diane White, our Director of Safe Schools, and Vicki Evans, Parade Director of Employee and Labor Relations, with multiple policies to review with the board today. Dr. Sheffield.
Good afternoon, board members and Dr. Fenoy. Today's workshop is to align our current policies with the 2020 federal regulations that have been issued by the United States Department of Education. The 4 policies that are impacted with this new order is Policy 5.81, which is protecting students from sexual harassment and discrimination. Policy 5.82, teen dating violence and abuse. Policy 5.001, protecting students from discrimination and harassment. And 5.002, anti-bullying and harassment. So at this time, June Neese, Diane Wyatt is going to guide us through the student portion of these 4 policies, and Vicki Evans Pire is going to lead us through the adult sections, because these 4 policies currently have, they've had the student and adult policies combined, so we're going to be separating the policies. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Ms. Easter and the team to lead us through both groups.
Good afternoon. As Dr. Sheffield mentioned, we are changing the language inside of these policies to align with the current policy that is in place that the previous administration put into play. I do need to say that we are in the expectation of bringing back policies to you later next year when the new administration changes the policies again, but we have to follow what's in present law right now, so we are going to be putting these in place. So if there's any questions to that, we can answer that later. But I'm going to turn it over to Diane to start with the changes that we have in the student policies. The first policy we want to talk about is 5.81, protecting students from sexual harassment and discrimination. With it, it has the most significant changes to us in relation to Title IX. First piece that we would like is to propose a change in order to align the title with the statute. So we'd like to change it to protecting students from sexual harassment and gender-based discrimination. There is new language that defines who the alleged target and alleged aggressors are referred as. They would be referred as the complainant and the respondent. That language also is going to include changes in very detailed how we report, investigate, and document the process, and how the grievance process is happening as well. Another change with this policy is the expectations of the roles. There are three major roles concerning this policy for the district. Title IX coordinator, there are roles and responsibilities, and that is a district level position that oversees the entire district's Title IX issue. Title IX lead contact is a school-based role. Each principal would recommend one person to be their Title IX lead contact. That person would ensure that all cases coming in were addressed, that they were assigned to an appropriate administration for investigation and that type of thing. And the final is the decision maker, and that would either be the principal level or a regional superintendent level. Last piece for this 5.81 is the grievance process. And the grievance process is outlined very specifically. One thing to note about that grievance process is that it, by regulations, is required to be in writing. And our next policy to discuss is 5.82, teen dating violence and abuse. That policy has been aligned to the Florida Department of Education's model policy. It defines our victims' rights and the protections and safeguards we put in place for the victims and the appeals process. 5.001 is protecting students from discrimination and harassment. We have aligned it to go with the Florida Education Equity Act. It removes that language, as Dr. Sheffield mentioned, that dealt with employees, and the grievance process has also been revised. One addition to that is that it designed a grievance procedure by an employee against a student is also within this policy. And the last policy from Safe Schools is 5.002, anti-bullying and harassment. We, again, with this policy, are requesting that a name change happens for it to protecting students from bullying and harassment to align with statutes. We have updated it to, again, align with the Florida Department of Ed's model policy. And it definitely goes through very specific safeguards for setting up the interventions in place, in addition to the priority of how you go through and document and investigate. We do have requirements that stakeholders are involved in the design of that, so we are working with students, parents, and school-based administration and teachers in order to get their input for revisions that you would see in the development phase.
Mrs. Whitfield?
Can I just ask, thank you, on the first one where it said now we're switching it to gender-based discrimination, does that incorporate people's, for transgender students or employees, or is that just biologically sex determined? Do you know?
For it, and Lisa would be able to address that. She is with us.
Thanks.
Lisa, you want to come here?
Okay, she can come here.
Good afternoon. So the policies are set to align with the district's non-discrimination policy as well as a revised Title IX, and they would protect against discrimination based on gender identity or gender expression as well.
Any other questions? Dr. Robinson?
So can we make sure it says that?
It will, yes.
Okay.
Okay, so now we're going to go into the employment policies. There's two policies that we're going to have revisions to our new policy. So 3.19 is our current policy prohibiting discrimination and harassment. And then 3.191 is going to be a policy that's geared towards Title IX specifically for discrimination and harassment. So policy 3.191 is the brand-new policy. Now, this policy takes into consideration what, as Diane talked about for the students, also applies to employees in a K-12 environment for discrimination, or basically sexual harassment and sexual discrimination. So a lot of the things that are lined up in the student policy are now going to be in this new 3.191 policy for adults. We will also have a complaint process set out, how they do informal complaints, how they file a formal complaint, how the investigation by the Title IX investigator will be conducted. We'll have a Title IX coordinator as well who just oversees the investigation, and then a decision maker. Under the law, those have to be 3 separate people, all trained in Title IX. And we're going to be moving that policy into effect to have all of the components that are required by Title IX. And this is for adults. As Diane said, we split this up under 2 determining factors. The first one is who is the accused. Okay, in the first case, if the accused is a student and the student is going to be the one could be facing discipline, that safe schools will handle it. Then if it is an employee who could possibly be disciplined for their behavior, then ELR would handle those investigations. So 3.19 is also going to address, as I said, allegations by students against faculty members. Then 3.19, we are going to be changing this one a little bit as well. 3.191 is going to specifically say prohibiting discrimination and harassment under Title IX. 3.19 is discrimination under Title VII. And if you know, Title VII is the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The reason why we need to revise this policy is because there were aspects of employee behavior embedded within the student policy. So if a teacher were racially discriminating against a student, it was handled in the student policy. It'll now be covered specifically in this policy 3.19. Very minor changes to that one. So this basically ends our workshop on this issue. Do you have any questions?
Any questions, board members? Dr. Robinson?
Okay, so I'm kind of late with this question, but in terms of bullying, and this is not really policy, but do we have, and I'm gonna call it treatment options for bullies? Because, I mean, most bullies have been traumatized themselves. They have some issues that they're dealing with, and they're bullying people. They've been bullied, whatever, God knows, happened in their home. Do we, when kids are identified as bullying others, do we then identify them to try to provide them with some type of assistance in hopes that whatever the issue is remedied and they won't continue to bully? It's not a policy question, but
It's going to be, as we do with most students who are struggling on our schools, we'd have a school-based team meeting. We would put interventions in place depending on, what led to it and what the mitigating factors were. But absolutely, we would want to, stop the behavior, but also identify why the behavior is taking place. So yes, we would have some type of treatment plan for the student who is being bullied as well as the students who are bullying. We want to make sure that we address both parts of that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, ladies. Mr. Superintendent,
Mr. Chairman, that's our last workshop for the day.
a motion to adjourn the workshops. Motion by Dr. Robinson, seconded by Mrs. Whitfield. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0.